to talk here about building a foundation for a smart city. But before we even engage in that, is it even possible to program a city? Is a city programmable? Markus?
I think so. I think so. Basically, even today, a city is to a certain extent programmable. We already discussed in the background a little bit on maybe it depends on the level of automation that we're talking about, but it is programmable and it will be programmable in the sense that in addition to all the concrete matter of a city, we will have an additional layer of a digital city, so to say, in future.
Okay. Well, since we're talking about real-time data and the use of real-time data in a city like this, there are potentially, I would imagine, quite a lot of risks associated with that. I mean, I'll go to you for that, Rob. I know you've been tasked by the Irish government to look at this very question and report back to the Prime Minister's office. I mean, have you any perspective on what the risks are with using real-time data in a city?
Right, okay, so the real issues around the data don't just relate to privacy, although obviously there are issues around privacy when you have lots of different systems that can collect the data. And we have lots of different types of systems collecting data about us, whether it's the spy in our pocket, which is our phone, or whether it's CCTV cameras, or whether it's sensor grids on bins that are tracking our mobile phones as we walk around the city, whether it's automatic number plate recognition cameras, and so on. So there's a number of different systems that are collecting personal level data or uniquely identifiable data, which kind of raises privacy concerns. And one of the issues there is that one of the clear fundamentals in privacy is around notice and consent. But there's no notice and consent on a lot of those systems. Nobody asks me whether a CCTV camera is going to film me and use facial recognition to identify me or to identify my number plate and so on. So there are real privacy issues. But there's also a whole series of other issues around data ownership and control, around kind of standards and integration, around data markets and third-party data markets and the kind of the sharing and selling of the data and how it then moves off into other systems, which feeds into other kinds of data uses, which might be around social sorting or might be around anticipatory governance or predictive profiling that have consequences to us in terms of whether we get the loan or whether we get the house or whether we get the job and so on. So there's questions around how the data moves. And then there's clearly issues around security, both in terms of the data security, in terms of people being able to hack in and get the data, but actually also the infrastructure itself. And there have been a number of examples now of city systems being hacked, whether that's somebody, so a couple of examples would be somebody hacking the tram network in one of the Polish cities and derailed 4 trams, or somebody who hacked a water treatment plant in Australia and released 1.5 million litres of sewage into the system, and so on. So there are potential vulnerabilities in having these systems that we can, that have this kind of digital software layer in that are networked together and we can potentially access. That's not to say that we shouldn't develop the systems, but we definitely need to start thinking much more seriously around some of these kind of privacy protection, security issues, and layering them in. So it's about security by design, it's about privacy by design, not as add-ons afterwards.
We can certainly get behind the hacking issues, and that would be a problem. But would it really be so bad if companies were allowed to use true and real data about you to make decisions about whether to give you that loan or that? I mean, why is that such a problem?
It becomes a problem when it starts to become things like racial profiling, which is quite clearly going on within predictive policing at the minute. That's one of the very strong critiques around that. It's very problematic if the data about you is dirty or faked or gamed, and you have no right of appeal to get in and change that data, or to even know how the decision was made to give you a poor credit rating.
Absolutely.
And so on. So there has to be a set of mechanisms put in where you have a kind of a right of appeal and a right to kind of understand how the data has been processed about you, and so on. So there are potential issues there, I think, that need to be kind of worked through. And as more and more different systems are put into cities that do kind of track and trace us as we move around, I mean, one of the protections at the minute is basically that these are all disparate systems. I mean, this is not a panopticon, it's a ellipticon. It's partial views from particular positions. But increasingly, these systems are being linked together. So things like urban operating systems that pull the data together into single places, and you can link the data together, then that creates, I think, a series of civil liberty issues that we need to look at.
So, Mike, in Schneider Electric, I know your focus is a lot on the business to business models. Are those risks that you all you would recognise, or are there any additional ones in that kind of model that should be considered?
No, I think the risks have been clearly identified. Cybersecurity is clearly a big one that everybody is becoming more and more aware of. What companies like ours do when we're generating, the automation systems that are running the infrastructures in a city, whether that's your grid or your water treatment plants or your buildings or your traffic management systems, is we build in more and more cybersecurity protection in the design phase. Okay. But for us, in terms of getting the efficiency out of the systems that cities have, clearly there's a risk from a civil liberties point of view and a data aggregation point. But the benefits for the citizens are also huge. The key challenge with the real-time data, of course, as Markus mentioned, is what level you automate it at. Somebody has to understand what data they're looking at, and somebody then has to be able to react to that in real time to either make a decision that will change a particular outcome, whether that's on a water treatment plant, whether that's on shifting a load from one part of your grid to another one, or how even to just be energy efficient in the way you manage your buildings. So huge benefit for citizens, but definitely some risks that need to be.
Okay. Well, let's start talking about the nice things and the potential benefits. Over to you, Markus. I know Bosch has fingers in lots of different pies and has lots of different business lines and business units, and your focus is on looking at new business models. Have you been thinking much about the potential benefits that there might be for a city, in a city, and using real-time data?
Yeah, of course. As you already said, we are thinking about and investigating, researching business models and how they are affected by the Internet of Things. And one general theme that we see is what we call the high-resolution management capabilities that the IoT will bring. What we think about, or what this means, is what we know from the digital world is a world where a business can control each and every single parameter of their business in real time and react to it in real time at a very high resolution. In the physical world, up to now, usually we don't have these same management capabilities. For example, taking air pollution. So we have very punctual measurements of air pollution in a city as of today. The IoT will bring capabilities to have these data in real time in a much higher resolution, meaning much more sensors deployed in a city that allows for a much more detailed and distinguished reaction to these problems, maybe